I remember when we were sitting at lunch when we had this conversation the first time, thinking about like what is it like emotionally as you go through those 5 phases as a practitioner, but also just the mental side of it. And so the first one is
To our loyal listeners from around the globe, welcome to the top one. I'm your co-host, Jerry Corless, along with my partner, Chas Emerson. Chas, how you doing today?
man, I'm doing great. I just can't help but smile every time you open us up in this podcast. It's so funny to me. Our loyal listeners, we're grateful for y'all.
Speaking a little slowly today, people, because we're at the time of this recording, we're a little bit frozen right now
Cold out.
in the southeast. It's chilly body and the words are slow, but the brain is nimble. We're ready to roll. Chas, the topic today, this runs parallel. This runs parallel to the 5 phases of the advisor life cycle, right? So as a reminder, and if you haven't listened to that podcast, it'd be a great one to circle back to. But of course, the 5 phases of the advisor life cycle are inception, right? When you're a new advisor and you have to have new revenue to meet your financial obligations, both personal and professional. Sustainability, when your recurring revenue is greater than the sum of your business and personal budgets. And of course, that naturally leads into capacity when essentially you have so many relationships that and recurring reviews that you are full. That then leads into expansion, and that's adding additional advisors to your team, your company. It really marks the transition from a practice to a company. And then ultimately to a owner, non-operator, either in practice or at least mindset, to build a better company that has roles, responsibilities, and follows systems and processes for executions. That's the advisor life cycle. And Chas and I, just dialoguing at one point, really observed that there are also 5 phases of advisor psychology. Chas, you wanna run through the names of those 5 phases, and then let's talk through those.
Yeah, I'll never forget. I remember where we were having lunch when we had this conversation. It was just like a light bulb moment. I've experienced these 5 phases in a lot of detail. So we'll go through them, but they are fear of not making it. When you first get in the business, just that fear of am I going to be able to make it through the business? We know the statistics aren't in our favor when we start out. Then once you have quote unquote made it, you have this fear of losing it or a scarcity mentality. I remember Jerry telling me all your clients aren't going to fire you at one time at some point, and that's an unrealistic fear there. Then you have the lethargy with protection. And, I would also probably add planning in that one as well. Sometimes we don't do quite as good of a job at planning as we should. And then we've got the rejuvenation through teaming or segmentation.
So Chas and I recognized just through dialogue that running parallel to the 5 phases of the advisor life cycle are the 5 phases of advisor psychology. And so kind of as you're going through that life cycle, there's also common mindsets that advisors go through as well. Chas, you want to run through the names of those and
Yeah,
description?
absolutely. I remember when we were sitting at lunch and we had this conversation the first time, thinking about like what is it like emotionally as you go through those 5 phases as a practitioner, but also just the mental side of it. And so the first one is fear of not making it. I mean, you're new in the business. We know the statistics are not in our favor. It's really hard to build a book of business. And then really immediately after that, once you've gotten there, it's the fear of losing it. It's really not a realistic fear, but, we all have it. Many, if not all advisors have what we would call a scarcity mentality, and we'll talk more about that in a minute. The third one is the lethargy with protection. So doing the risk management side for our clients, the stuff none of us really like to talk about. But I would also add to that probably planning is a part of it as well, doing more in-depth planning to really kind of taking the path of least resistance with our clients. The fourth one would be complacency, just, not having the drive that you once did. And then the last one, and I've really experienced this and have a lot of energy behind it. We've had other podcasts about this one, but the rejuvenation through teaming or segmentation, thinking more about just yourself and your practice, but building out an actual company at that point. And we've found it really rejuvenates and gets someone energized behind the practice.
Right. Good deal. And obviously, probably goes without saying, but I'm going to say it nonetheless. The point of evaluating where you are in the advisor life cycle and also where you are with the phase you are in with advisor psychology point of recognizing that and identifying that is to move more quickly through it, right? So some of these things, right? They're not positive states to be in, either in a phase of your career or in a psychological state that you can be in. And so our goal here, as was with the 5 phases of the advisor life cycle, is to hopefully, through our own experience and observation and relationships with others, provide some wisdom on how to expedite your progression through these phases.
Yeah, real quick, Jerry, I would say half the battle is acknowledging these phases. We had no idea when we were going through these, and so if we can help get you ahead of the curve, that's really the point of this podcast because we were just completely unaware as we worked through these. So, yeah,
Yeah,
it's
and you don't recognize it, and then you're just kind of plodding through these things like Chaz and I did, and thankfully we had each other to talk through these things with.
that's right.
But it's really you can operate in inefficiency and really just with some emotional emotional and mental difficulty that just slows down your progress and to some degree your effectiveness and hopefully not, but maybe even your joy along the way. So again, purpose of this is to recognize where you are, talk through, the maybe the root cause of those things and the path forward through these. That being said, Chaz, let's talk about fear of not making it, which is probably the most legitimate
Yeah,
most legitimate of the 5 phases. I think, so here's the deal, this one, it's, this is my 2 cents on phase 1, the fear of not making it. Hey, it's based in reality. I think the industry statistics are down to single digits for 4-year retention. So of those who start the career, 4 years later, there will be, I believe, under 10 remaining. Whatever the actual industry statistics are right now, they're not high for success. And so it's based in reality. My 2 cents on this piece is just not allowing it to consume you. So I would say a few things like about the mental state and then also some of the solution to it. So not allowing it to consume you, believing that what is meant to be will be, moving forward in faith, just being able to breathe in, breathe out, and recognize that your identity is not, and your value to people that you love and who love you is not based on your financial success and ability to build a practice in the financial planning and insurance and wealth management world. And so just release yourself from that fear of failure. And functionally, the best way to do that is to identify activity metrics. I believe we've spoken about this in previous podcasts as well, but identify activity metrics. And so where you go to define a successful day, it's the number of prospects that you contacted, it's the number of fact finders that you gathered, it's things that are within your control, so that and then track those statistics, that data, so that you can ultimately correlate your revenue to activity and understand the value of activity that you can take, and that gives you some comfort as well. But consistency and basing your success on your activity metrics rather than your actual revenue in the onset, I believe helps with that also. But Chaz, what are your thoughts?
man, it's really if we boil down this first one, it's rejection. It's hearing no over and over and over again, and so what I would encourage folks in this phase is don't take it personally, which is so hard, but just think of, like I used to think about, like, water that rolls off a duck's back, like, move on to the next one, and my grandfather, he passed away shortly after I started the business, but he told me, "Don't ever forget, every no you hear, you're that much closer to a yes." If I've told myself that once, I've told myself that a million times. The emotional highs and lows are so high and so low in this phase. And so, we used to joke, we'll work with anybody that fogs a mirror. You're just trying to build a book of business and you're just trying to make it. You're scraping and clawing. And what I would tell you is one of the ways we found to shorten this phase is if you have the opportunity to team or join a team, this can really shorten the phase of this one in particular, but also would encourage you to think about the definition of insanity. So you get in this phase and you're either not doing what you need to be doing over and over, or you're doing the same thing over and over and expecting different results. And so I'd encourage you to seek counsel for those that are ahead of you that can not just counsel you, but also encourage you of, hey, this is short lived. You just need constant reminder of this isn't going to last forever. See the forest for the trees in this phase.
You made a great point that it's a temporary condition. I remember being new in the business and just hating having to reach out to people all the time on a daily basis. And then also, when I would meet someone new, think, oh, I wonder if this person could potentially be a client. And I remember thinking, well, am I going to be evaluating people on their, like, every new person that I meet for the rest of my business life as they may be a good client? Because I don't want to do that. And I didn't even want to do it then. And the good news is you won't. You move on through the advisor life cycle, and that changes. And definitely things become more natural and organic in terms of new relationships and new clientele and referrals and so it definitely becomes
Yeah, it absolutely does, Jerry. I know we need to move to the next phase, but one other quick thing is you need passion to drive you. So look to other people's stories that are ahead of you. It's something's happened to a client or what good they've done for their client. And a lot of times getting over the hump of like looking at others as clients is not looking at them as clients, but also like, how can I help them? How can I put them in a better position? Or what if something bad happened to them and I didn't reach out and try? And so you got to almost use reverse psychology with yourself in that phase.
100%. Totally agree. And we do need to move on, but it's legitimate. Don't let it consume you. Be consistent. Consistency is ultimately what delivers results. So identify the activities that you're going to engage in and just do them day after day after day, and you'll get through it. Phase two. So we move from fear of not making it to fear of losing it. So this is really describes the advisor that has likely reached the point of sustainability and is on their way to capacity. Right. So if you think about this advisor, they've built enough relationships where they're doing recurring planning and they have recurring insurance renewals and they have recurring wealth management fees that their personal and business budgets are fully met by recurring revenue. And so they've really, air quote, arrived in the industry. But then they'll have this nagging fear, and we'll beat Chaz up a little bit on this one, but he's not the only one. Talk to many, many, many advisors where, you're talking about their goals and what they want to accomplish for the year, typically around the new year. And these are advisors with over 100 clients and sometimes, getting close to maybe even at 7 figures of recurring revenue. And they'll still be talking about making it, and you're like, "What are you talking?" Or like, "Well, what if I lose my clients?" Or they lose 1 client. And it's like, "Man, what if I l what if I lose my clients?" It's like, "You lost 1 client. You have 125 families." It's irrational, but common. So irrational, but common to fear losing it, probably because it was so hard to get it. But Chaz, you wanna talk a little bit about this phase?
Yeah, this one, I always joke, like, I have this scarcity mentality and Jerry has an abundance mentality, and genuinely believe most advisors have a scarcity mentality. And I've worked really hard in my life, not only in the business side, but also personally to have an abundance mentality. And it really comes into play here. You have worked so hard to build these clients, and you almost cling too tightly to it. You built rapport, they trust you. Almost feels too good to be true when you're in this phase because you're making plenty of money, so you're able to cover your business and personal lifestyle. And this one, I'll never forget. I lost a client, which by the grace of the Lord, my retention in my practice is like 99.99%. And this was a client that I should have fired anyway. It was not really a good client. I remember talking to Jerry, and I was sitting in my office, which is in a smaller town on a square, like, where there's stores and offices all around it. And Jerry's like, "You're crazy, man. Like, what do you think's gonna happen? You think all your clients are gonna get together and go to the square and just fire you?" And I like in my mind, so when I think of that and I get unrealistic views of this, I have this picture of almost like a protest. You got people holding signs like there's all my clients aren't gonna fire me. I've got a relationship there, I built rapport. We are going to lose clients for one reason or another, whether they pass away or something happens in their business or it just makes sense to part ways for one reason or another. But it is unrealistic, and recognizing it before it happens, I think, is a really important thing. I didn't recognize it before it happened, but in the midst of it, I've often have used that analogy that Jerry told me or example of all your clients aren't going to come gather on the square and fire you.
That's right. So it's an interesting thing, and we made the comment about phase one of the advisor psychology, how that's a rational fear. And you take single digit 4-year retention and you have a fear of not making it. That's a rational fear. And phase two is not rational. It's not rational to think that 120 families independently are all going to, within a period of a month, unless there's some event, right? But just in the normal course of life, are all going to fire an advisor at once. And it brings up the interesting point, and this is really important to recognize, is that the human condition is generally built to fear, like to have a fear out there. And in the absence of legitimate fears, like not making it anymore, then the human mind will naturally move to an irrational fear, just something to grasp a hold on. I've experienced personally through my professional progression and seen in many others also, like actual medical anxiety, diagnosed anxiety begins when there's nothing more, there's really no more legitimate thing to fear out there, right? And that's so in the absence of legitimate fear, it's kind of fear can surround a person. And the point is this is to recognize, do I have this irrational fear? Am I in phase two where I'm fear of losing my business that's actually very stable? Because the point is number one, at its worst, it can spiral down and turn into other types of fears. But at least very commonly, what this can do is paralyze people, freeze people, stop them from moving. Because really, when you get to the point of stability, you have significant knowledge at that point, significant network and relationships, significant goodwill, and you are in position to do tremendous good and experience tremendous growth. But you can be paralyzed and frozen by this fear and just waste time and emotion and lose joy when you really should be celebrating and being proactive and moving on, right, to the next phase. And so that's again, that's the whole point of this conversation, is to really recognize where you are and say, man, am I experiencing this? And let's shed this. Let's move on from this. There have been others that have gone down this path before me. I recognize this is irrational. I want to optimize the talents and equipping that I have been given and gone through and maximize those. So,
One other real quick thing on that one, Jerry, that really got me out of this phase. I did a client survey, just a real brief, I think it was like a 4 or 5 question survey. And the results were so positive. And I was like, okay, this is completely irrational. My clients do like me. They do care about me. They do like and desire the services that we provide. So anyway, let's move to the next one.
absolutely. But yeah, that's an important one. Phase three is lethargy, meaning like slow to, if at all, work on protection business. So think disability insurance, life insurance, things of that nature, and or planning itself, right? The process of going through planning, and there's some raw conversation here, folks. Really, the genesis of this, and it's not pretty, but it's, you get your revenue up to a certain point that's recurring, and Lord willing, you've moved beyond some of the irrational fears and you're getting fairly comfortable, and you listen to some maybe industry things that talk about growth, and you recognize, hey, I can just stack more and more and more assets under management and investment advisory fees and grow my recurring revenue. And, in the face of perhaps $1 million of recurring revenue, a $1,000 or a $500 annual premium life insurance policy premium is not too exciting from a revenue standpoint. And there's significant work that's involved in it, and people have to go through exams and all of those types of things. And an advisor can just either just make a statement like, I'm wealth only now, or not say that, but then in practice actually just not execute on the protection business. Chaz, you want to take it from there?
Yeah, I don't think this is an intentional thing. I think this one just kind of sneaks up on you, at least it did me. And I think about primarily the protection or risk management side of the business because it is one of the hardest in my opinion. And so I will never forget I was doing a review with a new client. It was their first anniversary, and I was going through their stuff to prepare for the review. And there was this blatant need for life insurance. And I remember sitting there at my desk and thinking, my goodness, like, what if something had happened to them? And I never had this conversation. And it caused me to kind of go back through my book of business. I realized it'd been a little over a year, and I just unconsciously stop talking about that stuff because it's harder. And I didn't have to talk about it because I didn't need the revenue anymore. But then you have to move into what is really the right thing to do. And I would argue that this can lead into planning, like making sure beneficiaries are set up properly and reviewed when you're doing your client review, renewing an actual financial plan, and really just doing the right things for your clients. I mean, that's bottom line. And oftentimes, it's the path of least resistance is the easiest thing to do, and you're just not talking about some of the harder things that you still need to continue to talk about with your clients, which really dovetails directly into complacency.
Yeah, and the reality is too, when you're in that position, it's actually no longer difficult to talk to about your clients.
Absolutely.
Because when you need the revenue and you're talking about insurance, you feel like, well, this is for them, but it's also for me. When you're in a position you don't need it, and it's actually more of a hassle to go through the application process, it's not actually a hard conversation to have anymore. It's just literally like, okay, well, for my team and for me, this is some hassle. That can be the mindset, but hey, and we're preaching to ourselves here, so don't, take this in the spirit of what
100%.
it's intended. No, none of us that get into this business and love these clients want to be the one that gets a phone call that something tragic has happened and we didn't do what needed to be done, and now a family's in a bad spot. Nobody wants to be in that position.
No.
And it's also just really important from a mindset because people can shift. Chaz, I think, you hear things about how people shift their practice and say, oh, I'm wealth only now. Not doing the insurance business anymore. And what I'd say there is, we all get in the business, and man, there's a time where you really appreciate that $1,000 premium, right? Where it's keeping you in the business back when you're in that inception phase. And again, we're preaching to ourselves here as much as all of us in the community, but it's not okay for us to get what we need and then at that point to stop giving others what they need.
Yeah, and honestly, if you wanna be wealth management only, but you're still doing financial planning, are you not gonna make sure your clients do their estate planning and follow through and do that? That's part of our job. Well, same thing on the life, disability, long-term care. Like, you need to if even if you don't wanna implement it, you need to make sure they are implementing it and
That's
encourage
right.
them on that end, just like on estate planning or making sure their auto and homeowners are structured properly, et cetera, et cetera.
That's right. You got to continue to dot the I's and cross the T's,
Exactly.
even when you're a point of great stability on for yourselves. Moving on to phase 4, that is complacency. I'm gonna let you give the intro on this one.
Man, I think complacency in my mind is you almost get a little lazy. You're going through the emotions. It really ties in very, very much so in the lethargy side of things. But you just almost lose the energy. You lose the twinkle in your eye for the business. Like you got in here with this passion and you really want to do the right thing. You want to take care of people. And man, it's just like anything else in life. Over time, it gets stale and you lose the desire to continue to grow it. It's become this behemoth of a practice, and it's kinda like, "Now what?" And the path of least resistance is just to go through the motions, do your annual reviews, and not really spend the quality time with your clients or think about other opportunities to continue to build the business. It just becomes about you and making a good income, and you're just like, Do I really wanna get pick up the phone and call that prospect?" You know what I mean? Do I really wanna implement more insurance? I mean, it's just it's almost like you become Eeyore type in this phase of the business or a Debbie Downer versus continue to pressing on and trying to do the right thing and affect more and more families.
Yeah, I would say that the way I differentiate, like, being slow to implement the protection business versus the complacency phase. Complacency phase is when you've really just moved into losing the excitement for gaining a new client, period, right? And so the reality here is, and it's profound, I've observed for a long time that this business, it's a case of the haves and the have-nots in this business. You got these advisors that are equipped and they have resources around them and they're ready to do more work and they can't get more work because generally they're newer in the industry and they just don't have the professional reputation and the network and the clients that are advocating for them. Then you got these advisors that have been in the business for a while that have hit certain levels of success where it just takes on a life of its own and they've just got more business than they can handle. And you can forget how many people out there are still truly in need. You can forget how many families out there, regardless of their income and their net worth, that still have uncertainty around their finances, want to have a professional that's overseeing and guiding them, not only with practical functional measures in their finances, but also with wisdom. And you can lose the excitement for taking on those new families and ultimately delivering peace and tranquility into those families and their businesses in a place where they today may be experiencing concern and fear and insecurity. And so, that complacency is not I think it's a natural state to get to. It's almost a period of rest, I think.
Yeah,
It
you can
takes a
breathe.
while to get to complacency, right?
Yeah.
I mean, it's probably for most people around a 15-year journey. So you've gone through a lot at this point, and I think there is reason to have rest, but then you need to get rejuvenated and remember what you're called and at that point equipped to do as well. Further thoughts on complacency, Chas?
No, I think you nailed it. I would say, yeah, one last thought actually. In our studies of other advisors, we have seen a direct correlation of residual revenue, their recurring revenue that continues to come in, and the lethargy and protection and planning as well as complacency. To Jerry's point, when your income gets to a certain level, I think there's a point where I can breathe and it's almost like I can rest for a minute, and there is I believe, a direct correlation in that. So it's not necessarily all bad, but again, if we can recognize it early on, it allows you to enter this next phase much quicker.
And our final phase for today is rejuvenation through expansion or teaming, or whatever language you want to use on the end there. But essentially, that's where you go from having a practice where typically you've got a staff person or people that are supporting you as an advisor, and you have your clients, and you've got a really stable business with sound systems and processes and great revenue, and you've experienced a lot of professional success. But rejuvenation really comes, and Chas can speak firsthand of this, through adding people to your practice. So you're really transitioning. So this goes along with phase 4 of the advisor life cycle. You're transitioning from a practice into a company. You're adding another advisor initially, and then eventually other advisors beyond that. And it's not only is it a way that you can scale your business, take on new clients, bring other people into the industry, just a whole lot of positives there from a functional standpoint, but then also as it relates to the advisor's psychology standpoint, you get rejuvenated yourself. So, Chas, you want to talk about that?
Yeah, absolutely. I would say when I think about this phase in those that don't transition to this, it's almost like they're hoarding their business, and we don't want to hoard. We don't want to cling too tightly. It's also almost this selfish mentality of not wanting to share, not wanting to share their knowledge, not wanting to give back to the next generation. I've actually heard other advisors say that, well, I had to go through that, and not wanting to shorten that time period for others because that's what they had to do. They had to learn the hard way. And I don't think that's the right mentality. We need to be careful of that. I mean, how much nicer would it have been when you started the business if you were able to keep the first phase down to a year versus 3 to 5? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And so I would encourage you to be careful of that. It's in this phase, it becomes more than just about you and your practice. And so for me, it was the first phase of actually getting partners. So actually, honestly, it was hard to let go, but creating scale, making sure that you've got backup to your backup when it comes to your operations team and your staff, and you've really got the best of the best. And then moving on to like adding associates and segmenting your business and breaking off a piece of it. And in my mind, when I went through this phase, my income's just going to go down by X amount. And here's the ironic thing. And we have seen this over and over and over. We've seen 30+% growth in practices that segment. And so it's almost like, it's almost like a reward for letting go and doing the right thing. It's amazing that it happens. and it frees up your time and energy to be able to focus on the type of client that you want to focus on, and those clients that you've become complacent with and you aren't maybe doing the right planning or the way that you should have done it previously, man, those younger associates that come in after you, they're fired up and they're doing really good stuff with those clients. So your clients are better taken care of as well, which has given me a lot of energy. You're able to affect a lot more families. You're able to actually see someone else come up in the business in a much better way than you came up in the business. And in my experience, they really, really appreciate and see that. And so it's been a lot of fun for me, and rejuvenation would be a great way of describing. I'm a lot more excited about my personal practice now that I've begun doing this, and I've seen this with everybody that's done it. I could think of multiple names off the top of my head of when I entered this phase. It was like they were contemplating getting out of the business or selling their practice, and all of a sudden they're growing this behemoth of a team and they're energized, and it becomes more about a legacy than what am I gonna make this year. Does that make sense, Jerry?
And so, again, if you circle back to the podcast on the 5 phases of the advisor life cycle and you listen to the components of moving from capacity into expansion into owner, non-operator, those would be helpful from the functional standpoint. And what that does is it is the portal when you're an advisor who's at capacity to new growth, to growing quickly again. At least equally and arguably more important, it is also the pathway to rejuvenation. And there are truths that are out there, right, that you can point to, all kinds of sayings that exist, like almost universally, the hard thing is the right thing, right? And another one is, it is more blessed to give than to receive. And it's profound, but when you are helping others get where they want to go, you'll have more satisfaction. And ultimately, when you're at that point of financial success, none of us have ever, quote, arrived in this business, but there is a point where you have a thriving business that has a significant profit, where your net worth is high, your cash reserves and liquidity is strong. All of those types of things have been accomplished. Man, there's so much, that you can be in that state of complacency. And then when you give to others, you can really experience tremendous fulfillment in the business. And so we encourage you in that. It takes some faith. It takes some letting go to bring other people into your business. You got it. And that gets into this whole emotional side. You might have to work through fear of losing it. If you bring somebody in the business, am I going to lose? Am I going to lose clients? Short answer, you won't, right? You might have some emotional hurdles to get over, but ultimately what you will find is rejuvenation and fulfillment and satisfaction alongside new growth in your company.
No doubt. In closing on for me, Jerry, I would say, man, this is really good stuff. It's a little touchy-feely. We know this, but reality is it's real, and if we can get you through it quicker, it's a big deal. Have an abundance mentality, and, sorry this one's a little longer than we normally record, but I feel like it's really good stuff.
Right. Great time to stop, self-examine, look at where you are, what are the thoughts that are going on in your head, and work through these progressions. From the top one, we wish you the best. That's a wrap.
See you
Thanks.
later.